नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. Hare Krishna. So it was our interest to touch upon the first canto, as we have been talking about it for several months. And we concluded the first canto a month back, a month and a half. And now our interest is for us to be able to briefly understand what we touched upon, because when you do something for a full year almost, then the chances of us remembering and being able to assimilate all of what has been learned is a little bit challenging. So it is wise for us to go back and revisit, so we capture the essence and then we bring the essence on so that we could continue the journey. And the reason is that it's all been arranged in a very, I would say, meaningful and thematic manner. So there's a great need for us also to kind of keep in mind what was gathered in the first canto as we proceed towards the second, and then further out each canto. So first and foremost, what is interesting is that the first canto, text 5, begins with this particular verse, text 5. Te ekaratu munayah pratarhut hutagnyah satkritam sutam asinam paparchuridam adarat. Translation. One day after finishing the morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Sutta Goswami, the great sages made inquiries with great respect about the following matters. This is the conversation between the sages of Naimisharanya. And the sages of Naimisharanya, they were real seekers, and this was the beginning of Kali. So Naimisharanya, in one sense, is considered to be the center of the universe. It is considered to be the hub in certain ways. And as auspicious activities begun in that area, practically have a far-reaching impact into many hundreds of years down the line as age progresses. So the idea is for us to create auspiciousness, you find a spot, and this is basically how they operated in those days. I was recently reading an article sent by someone to me where they found that most of the most prominent temples of Lord Shiva in India, they are all constructed over several periods. Over several periods, these Shiva temples are constructed on 79-degree longitude. Yeah, quite interesting that 79-degree longitude, which passes through India, is a line on which all the major Shiva temples in India have been constructed over centuries by different personalities and over, different cultures. So the point being that they did not have any GPS, they did not have any kind of, I would say, significant measurement tool for them to understand 79-degree longitude. But the sciences in our culture were so advanced that they had perfect knowledge of being able to bring about auspiciousness. Now, why 79 degrees? Why is it that all the Shivji temples have to be constructed on the 79th degree or close to it? That I do not know yet. I don't have an answer. I haven't given it full thought. But I just wanted to share a certain circumstance that there's something which is there around that 79 degrees which passes through India, that all the temples of Lord Shiva, which are major temples, are being constructed on the same line from north of India to south. Now, this is quite fascinating because over hundreds of years, over different time periods of, I would say, different kings and different changes that have occurred in Bharatvarsha, they have consistently stuck to this theme. And it is not so much that they went and measured where the first temple was or the last temple was to find out where to construct the next one. They did it through scripture. So there was something about the science of being able to understand the construction of the material universe and impact on the population in general for many hundreds of years if you were to do a positive activity. So Naimisharanya was where they gathered because everybody was aware of the fact that Kali was upon them. Kali Yuga was upon them. It was literally upon them, and they wanted to really impact Kali in a very powerful way, and they want to strategize. You see, oftentimes we think that strategy came about because of modern day corporate I would say, corporate management theories and management schools. It's not true. We read in our Siddhanta, Nityananda Ram and others sat down in a particular place in Mayapur where they strategized together. Sri Advaita Acharya, Lord Nityananda, they all sat down in a particular place in Mayapur where they strategized for Harinam to spread. Srila Prabhupada used to go to the same spot every year and spend great number of hours chanting Harinam to gain insight and to gain blessings from the place where Lord Nityananda and his personal associates sat down to strategize Harinam. Now, Lord Nityananda began the Namahatta in Surabhi Kunj, which is the house of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. There's great history behind Surabhi Kunj from a mystical, from a spiritual perspective, because that is very intimately connected to Ananga Manjari, who is basically Srimati Radharani's sister, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is considered to be Kamala Manjari, who is a servant of Sri Ananga Manjari. And Ananga Manjari is Janava Thakurani, who is Lord Nityananda's power, Nityananda's Shakti. So it was natural that Lord Nityananda started the first Namahatta from Surabhi Kunj, which is basically where Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur established his residence, because he is the servant of Ananga Manjari. These are very confidential aspects of our tattva, but the point I'm just trying to make is that they basically established themselves and positioned themselves in very, very confidential spots, which allowed them maximum leverage to bring about positivity and change towards so many other living entities who are going to be coming into the planet. So this is the whole purpose. Now we find the sages have gathered around in Naimisharanya. In Naimisharanya, they are gathered around and they are wanting basically to strategize for the future, because Kali is upon them. So they have a lot of impending questions. They want to know, what is it that I can do? What is it that I can powerfully do for us to be able to move forward? I have been doing a few things thus far. I have been doing a few things, but this is the beauty of a sincere spiritual seeker who always wants to strive to make improvement. They are not built into, or they're not really succumbing to complacency, where they're saying that it is okay for me to be complacent. It is okay for me to, basically be impacted in any which way. I don't really care. It's okay for me to be complacent. I can do exactly what I did the previous year, and I could benefit again this year. It is not the mood. They're constantly seeking and striving to make improvements. This is where I was the previous year, and this is where I want to be in the next year, but then I can't really do the same thing. If I have been doing certain things the previous year, it has gotten me today to where I am, expecting that the same behavior is going to yield better results the subsequent year is nonsense, because it doesn't work. Go tell your manager at your workplace that you're going to do exactly what you did the previous year, but you need to get promoted the following year, and see what he says. You see, this is the whole idea. There's a fact. You see, even in the material paradigm, you're expected to add, you're expected to improvise, you're expected to improve upon, build efficiencies, and it is all the more so with the spiritual paradigm. In the spiritual cycles, you're basically climbing a mountain, you're climbing a peak. Scaling a peak requires that you increase your effort as you go along, not keep it at the same level, because the peak is getting steeper. Not everybody can reach the top, can they? Not everybody can scale and reach the Mount Everest or right at the peak. You need to have someone who has the ability to climb, who is able to put in extra efforts, who is basically shedding unwanted weight, underline that, as he goes along, and he is able to carry forward and move forward with a lighter heart and lighter shoulders, so that he is able to get to greater heights. This is basically a part of spirituality as well. We are expected to strategize on a year-by-year basis. We are expected to look for answers to see how we could modify and how we could change as a consequence of being able to impact positively. Yeah, this is very much expected. Now, the sages in Naimisharanya had a similar objective. They basically were wanting to strategize. They were wanting to see that Kali is upon us and we need to make some changes. How is it that I can effectively position myself so that I could make some changes? Yeah, so this is very important. Yeah, because Kali is upon them, and they are knowing that the quality of time basically has changed. Because the quality of time has changed, I need to step up efforts. If the world is complex, I need to step up efforts, because with the complex world, I can't expect to have the same good results as I did the previous year without being able to put in more. This is very important for us to understand. This is very important for us to understand. So the sages gathered around in Naimisharanya, and they were so sincere, they were seeking answers. So they sought answers from Srila Sutta Goswami. Why did they seek answers from Sutta Goswami? We're going to just look at it very quickly so that we understand it. First of all, they offered a seat of esteem. And then we want to know what are the qualities of Srila Sutta Goswami, which basically allowed him to receive this particular seat. Text 6. The sages said, respected Sutta Goswami, you're completely free from all vice. Number one, he had absolutely no vice. He was faultless. He was faultless from the perspective of the sages. And these were very accomplished sages. So they had someone who was a very sincere, very straightforward person who was not in touch with material energy. And as a consequence, he was completely free from vice. Yeah, you're well versed in scriptures famous for religious life and in the Puranas and histories. Yeah, so basically, he was not only well accomplished, he was also well versed in Shastra. So he was completely free from vice. So the first quality is to be free from vice for us to be able to understand Shastra even. So without being free from vice, one can't really understand Shastric conclusions because Shastric conclusions are very subtle. And when one is connected to the gross world and when they're trying to attain some kind of pleasure from the gross world, you have a problem. So as a consequence, Shastra basically demands that we become free from all kinds of vice as a prerequisite. This is a moral requirement, and this is true for Ashtanga Yoga. That's the reason why Ashtanga Yoga starts with Yama, then goes to Niyama. We have our 4 regulative principles, which is Niyama, rules and regulations to be followed in respect to sadhana. Yama is basic morality which you have to observe in society. Now, Yama and Niyama is required in Ashtanga Yoga. In similar fashion, we require Niyama as well, rules and regulations. So to be free from vice, it allows us to approach the subtle science of spirituality with a clean heart. Because we can't really be engaging in any form of sense gratification and expecting that the senses will not interfere with the objective of reaching conclusions which are of a far more sublime, spiritual, subtle nature. Because the more subtle knowledge is, more sublime knowledge is, the less effective or less useful senses are. The senses are less and less and less useful as the purpose of and the process of attaining knowledge becomes more and more subtle. Now, and they're also saying this, you've also gone through them under proper guidance, have also explained them. So he has not only learned, he has also taught. It is said that you only take in about 25% of what you hear. You take in a little bit more of what you read. You take in a lot more of what you hear. And then if you really teach the subject that you have heard and read about, then you attain far greater results with how much you can assimilate. So this is basically also a statement on what he can learn. They're basically saying, not only are you free from vices, you have learned from the proper sources, you are also basically being in the role of explaining Shastra. So since you've shared realizations, you put yourself in a position of teaching others, quite naturally, there's been other qualifications which have been heaped upon you because you have fully understood it. What is the role of a teacher? What is the role of a teacher of Shastra specifically? Shastra, specifically our kind of subject, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhakti science, the science of Bhakti, is extraordinarily sublime and it is very complex. It is very complex. If you can basically digest very complex subject matter and deliver it in a manner for practical use, it means that someone has already understood it in a deep way. That's the reason why they're able to explain it in a simplistic manner. It was said, I was in a program a couple of days ago, and one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples was speaking, and during Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi ceremony, there was a statement which was being made by one of his very senior godbrothers. And the very senior godbrother basically was the first one to leave for Germany, to Europe, to preach to the Western world. And he came back with a few German disciples. And that was considered to be a phenomenal I would say, accomplishment by the Vaishnava society of those days, which is the 1930s, 1940s. Now, he was the one who was also giving the address when Srila Prabhupada was ceremony. The Samadhi was over, but then the next day, I think they had this glorification. And he was the first one to speak because he was accorded the first seat for the simple reason that he was the senior most. Now, he said, in glorification of Prabhupada, apparently, he basically was not glorifying. He was basically making a statement. He said that Srila Prabhupada accomplished a great deal. He had gone abroad even before Srila Prabhupada, but he did not have the mentality to preach to hippies. This was the statement. So in other words, I did not have the mentality or the ability to preach to hippies. Srila Prabhupada had it. So it was not meant to be a compliment in the context in which he was speaking. He basically was saying that, I couldn't really put myself down into such a level where I could preach to people who can't understand me. And what was astonishing was that the fact is that Srila Prabhupada took very, very complex subject matter and condensed it and presented it to an audience which had absolutely no qualifications to come in touch with such scripture. This was the glory of Srila Prabhupada. This is the glory of Srila Prabhupada's books. This is the glory of Srila Prabhupada's books, that Srila Prabhupada's books actually created a bridge and allowed people who have no background whatsoever and who are not in touch with Vedic culture, they were not in touch with any culture of any sort, to come in touch with the highest philosophy and the most complex philosophy in a very lucid way. You see, this is real accomplishment. So the point which we're trying to make here is teaching complex truth is an accomplishment because the person has digested it. They have digested very complicated subject matter and they're representing it in a manner which is very palatable and can be understood by an average person. That's the reason why Srila Sutta Goswami is being accorded respect for his role as an educator of not only vastly well-read scholar, but he was an educator as well of the same. And he was widely respected for it. So that's the reason for this particular statement. They were very careful in using words in Srimad Bhagavatam. So here, this particular statement of according him respect as someone who taught is because he had the ability to digest vast amounts of information and he could present it and arrange it and give it to others. Now, the second verse, being the eldest learned Vedantist or Sutta Goswami, you are acquainted with the knowledge of Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of Godhead. And you also know other sages who are fully versed in all kinds of physical and metaphysical knowledge. And because, and this is very much important, first they say that you have been well versed, you have very good moral qualities, you're well attained, you've read all scriptures, you've taught all scriptures, and now they're basically giving him respect and they're saying that you also had the association of great personalities. Now they're qualifying him by association. Yeah? And then now the ultimate qualification is coming up. And because you're submissive, despite having such vast qualification, Sutta Goswami is being called by the sages of Naimisharanya as being submissive. Because you're submissive, your spiritual masters have endowed you with all the favors bestowed upon a gentle disciple. Therefore, you can tell us all that you have scientifically learned from them. So this is like an ultimate qualification which they're giving. They're saying, despite all these qualifications that you have, you're submissive, you have humility. Because you're humble, your spiritual masters, being pleased with your attitude, have just bestowed upon you all the blessings they can give you. And that is also something which they're saying makes him the most favorable, or I would say most ideal, I would say representative at that point in time to head a large assembly of very accomplished personalities. So this was not an ordinary assembly. These were very accomplished sages. Very accomplished. They all gathered together because they felt that Srila Sutta Goswami was the most appropriate head. Please, therefore, being blessed with many years, explain to us in an easily understandable way what you have ascertained to be the absolute and ultimate good for people in general. So now, please focus on this verse. This is verse 9 of the first canto. Yeah. Please, therefore, being blessed with many years, explain to us in an easily understandable way what you are certain to be the absolute and ultimate good for people in general. This is how we begin Srimad Bhagavatam, literally. Sutta Goswami assembled in Naimisharanya with great sages. The great sages basically qualifying the speaker, saying this person is qualified because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, X number of qualities. And then they're positioning themselves and asking a certain question. They're saying, being blessed with many years, explain to us in an easily understandable way what you are certain to be the absolute and ultimate good for the people in general. Now, the next verse, this is a continuation by the sages of Naimisharanya. O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men have but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. My goodness. In this age of Kali, men have short lives, and they are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. They had a vision into the future, such clear vision. Fascinating. Yeah, they're quite ruthless in their explanation. They really saw it. There are many varieties of scriptures. In all of them, there are many prescribed duties which can be learned only after many years of study in the various divisions. Therefore, O sage, please select the essence of all these scriptures and explain it for the good of all living beings, that by such instruction their hearts may be fully satisfied. So now this question is being raised. Yeah? So basically, they are basically imploring him for a solution for Kali, because they're saying what's upon them is a very dangerous age, and this dangerous age basically requires a special focus. We all need to reposition ourselves. None of us can continue the way we did the previous year. We can't continue doing what we did in the previous yuga. We need to change, and we also need to be able to instruct those who are coming along in this particular age with a special way. We need to give them special instructions. So they are basically saying that they want basically instructions for them to be able to move forward. They also want instructions so that they could pass it on to the souls who are coming upon in Kali Yuga, for the simple reason that there are so many disqualifications just being born in this age. Now, let's just go to one but last of the first canto. We're going to the last chapter, and we're going to the one but last verse. Okay, now it is a few verses before the last which I want to read for some better context. This is verse 32 of the last chapter, which is the 19th chapter of the first canto. If any of you or all of you are holding the first canto, please try and follow along with me, because if you touch Srimad Bhagavatam, as you hear Srimad Bhagavatam, this is Krishna himself in a literary form. Touch it, get used to reading the verses, at least the English part, and you will benefit immensely. So this would make it even better if you can have a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you do not have a copy of Srimad Bhagavatam today, don't rush off to get one now, because I want to continue with the class. For the future reference, please do keep a copy so that we could go along and read verses together, if you're not already doing so. So verse 32 of the last chapter, which is chapter 19. The fortunate King Parikshit said, O Brahmana, by your mercy only you have sanctified us, making us onto places of pilgrimage, all by your presence here as my guest. This is Parikshit Maharaj to Sukadev Goswami. By your mercy, we who are but unworthy royalty become eligible to serve the devotee. Text 33. Simply by our remembering you, our houses become instantly sanctified. And what to speak of seeing you, touching you, washing your holy feet, and offering you a seat in our home. Just as an atheist cannot remain in the presence of the personality of Godhead, so also the invulnerable sins of a man are immediately vanquished in your presence, O saint, O great mystic. Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is very dear to the sons of King Pandu, has accepted me as one of those relatives just to please his great cousins and brothers. Otherwise, without being inspired by Lord Krishna, how is it that you have voluntarily appeared here, though you are moving incognito to the common man and are not visible to us who are on the verge of death? You are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees. So we heard Sutta Goswami being glorified by the audience. Now we are hearing Srila Sukadev Goswami being glorified by Parikshit Maharaj. This was the initial recitation. The end of the first canto is where the recitation begins. The beginning of the first canto is where one of the personalities who heard the first recitation, Sutta Goswami, is being glorified to speak. So you have one context of Sutta Goswami, who is one of the audience here, reciting in Naimisharanya, and the other context, you're also having the recitation as it was done originally by Sukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. In both cases, the speaker is glorified, and we're getting to the topic here. You are the spiritual master of great saints and devotees, and therefore begging you to show the way of perfection for all persons, and especially for one who is about to die. Please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship. Also, what he should not do. Please explain all this to me. O powerful Brahmana, it is said that you hardly stay in the houses of men long enough to milk a cow. Sri Sutta Goswami said, finally, this is again Srila Sutta Goswami coming back. He has recounted all the events leading up to Parikshit Maharaj sitting with Sukadev Goswami. Now Srila Sutta Goswami is coming back into the scene, the last verse of first canto. The king thus spoke and questioned the sage using sweet language. Then the great and powerful personality, the son of Vyasadeva, who knew the principles of religion, began his reply. This is the last verse. So in between the first and the last verse, you have Srila Sutta Goswami appearing before the sages of Naimisharanya, detailing the conversation between Sukadev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. And the topic which is being discussed is exactly what Parikshit Maharaj is talking about. There in the beginning, it was a general question for the entire age. Here, Parikshit Maharaj is saying that he's asking him, please let me know what a man should hear, chant, and remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all of this to me. He is basically preparing to leave the world, and he wants to know what is the best way to spend the next 7 days. And he's practically wanting to engage in hearing. And this is basically the most important instruction for the age of Kali. The age of Kali receives Srimad Bhagavatam as a great gift. It is said that deliverance in this particular age is to follow in the footsteps of those who started the age. What started the age? The starting of the age of Kali was marked by the departure of Parikshit Maharaj. It was marked by a recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam in Naimisharanya. It was marked by a recitation of Srimad Bhagavatam by Sukadev Goswami directly to Parikshit Maharaj and his followers, whoever was assembled there. Now the age of Kali, as it begins, now the instructions are going to come through in terms of what exactly should be done. What is it that should be done in the age of Kali? That is going to be the topic that is going to practically begin the second canto. So in the first canto, we saw a few things. What is the most important factor that was seen in the first canto? We spoke about it briefly in the previous session. We spoke upon it, we touched upon it briefly in the previous session. What is the purpose of spirituality? What is it which you're trying to gain here in chanting Hare Krishna? What is it specifically we want to gain here by chanting Hare Krishna? What is it which is being seen in the first canto from the beginning to the end? What is being seen in the first canto from the beginning to end is the establishment of Krishna as a personal associate and a friend by many devotees, and what they go through. What have they gone through, and how much faith do they have in the Lord, where they're extraordinarily fixed in all these circumstances. Imagine Mother Uttara. Mother Uttara, the mother of Parikshit Maharaj, she was actually widowed as a very young girl. She was pregnant with Parikshit Maharaj. And in the battle of Kurukshetra, she lost her father, her brother, she lost her husband, and she practically was going to lose her son. But despite losing so many, Her faith was unwavering, where she ran to Krishna when Ashwatthama fired the Brahmastra. She ran to Krishna. Whom did she run to? She did not run to Arjuna. She did not feel that Krishna let them down. There was not a moment of doubt in her mind that Krishna had let us down. He did not protect my husband. He did not protect my father. He did not protect my brother. Now, what is the point in going to Krishna? What kind of a God is he who doesn't step in when he is supposed to? He doesn't do his job. Why should I go running back to him? What is the purpose of my going running back to him? He didn't do that. She didn't do that. She practically did not have any doubts in her mind despite going through such horrible experiences. So then one wonders, what is it which allowed her to be able to be in such pain and not experience suffering? This was the theme. What was it which allowed Mother Uttara to be in such pain? She was in pain. Wasn't she in pain? She had lost her husband a few days back. She had lost her father, brother, all the males in the family were annihilated. And she was a very young widow, and she was carrying a child in a womb, and she was being attacked. So wasn't she in pain? Wasn't she in pain? She was. She was in intense pain. But she did not allow this pain to practically overcome her senses to such a point, overcome her intelligence to such a point that she forgot her relationship with Krishna. This is the beauty. This is basically what is being shown to us. This is an extreme scenario. There's an extreme scenario of someone who is running to Krishna, who has gone through a lot and still hasn't given up. She still runs to Krishna. She really has no doubts that this is the person who is going to protect my son. She does not think for a moment that he did not protect my husband, who was the nephew of Krishna. The nephew of Krishna was not spared on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So what is it that we see here in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, the beginning to the end of first canto, is a series and series of mishaps and tragedies that are being imposed upon the most dear devotees of the Lord, and they don't falter in their faith. What is it which allows someone to embrace this kind of pain and yet not falter in their faith? What is it that allows them to do so? We spoke about it in the previous session. What is it which allows people to basically go through this level of pain and not basically lose their faith? We speak of the fact that there is pain and there is suffering. If someone is suffering immensely from whatever they have gone through, they will have no faith. They will have no faith. When you see someone like Uttara running towards Krishna, even though in such great pain, it means there is no suffering, even though there's such pain. Why is it so? It is because she has already found out who she is in the eternal kingdom. She has already been gifted and blessed with Krishna's mercy. Krishna is present with her at all times. He is right there in front of her. And she has already been given the faith. Janma karma chame divyam. She has understood Janma karma chame divyam through tattva. She has understood by realization about the great personality who is standing in front of her. She knows her relationship. She has sambandha gyan. Because she has sambandha gyan, she has very little connection with the present. She has very little connection with the basic physical presence of whatever was transpiring in that particular place. She has a greater connection with the spiritual sky. She has an absolute understanding of what has been destroyed is matter and what exists eternally is spirit. But this is not just by theoretical understanding. This is by practical experience. She has experienced spirituality to such an extent that she's being able to overcome such intense grief and being able to go forward and seek shelter of Krishna, even though there have been so many different failings and experiences which are not so conducive for her. This is very important for us to realize that you can't really be going to the same person if that person has let you down. It is the case with most people. Most people do not like to basically go to a person who they see as letting them down. Many of us, if we believe that we haven't received what we ought to receive in Krishna consciousness, we have a tendency to give up on Krishna even. We even question the experience. We even question the presence of the Lord. We question the presence of the Lord in our lives. We question the experience. We start saying that basically, I did so much. I chanted for so long. I served for so long. I did so many rounds and so many different temple visits and so much seva. And here I am, and I have a crisis. You're not around. So make a comparison. The reason why this happens is because there's a reason for it. The reason is that we are still identifying very much with our existence. We are very much identifying with our identity on this planet. As a consequence, identifying with the identity that we have established in this planet, as the identity of this planet gets destroyed, which is definitely a part of what's coming, we as professionals will experience destruction at some level. Regardless of who we are, regardless, you will normally see even great accomplishers in the corporate world being brought down at some point in their lives. They go through intense struggle. There is generally a certain put down. People basically put them down for their accomplishments in the sense that they are minimized in many ways. In other words, when your identity in the world as an individual, be it a professional, be it a father, mother, male, female, if it is not going to be challenged, it would not be the norm. It will be challenged. And when it is challenged, there's great pain. And the pain is equal to the level of attachment we have to that identity. If you have great attachment to the identity of being a relative of someone, and that relationship gets challenged, then we feel great pain because there's attachment. So as a consequence, when these identities of the world, they become minimized in the relationship with Krishna, then even if they come under great attack, as they're bound to be, because this is the material world, the steadfast relationship with Krishna has the capacity to hold the person up. This is what we observed in the first canto. Mother Kunti offering prayers, saying, bring upon me greater and greater tribulations. Bring upon us tribulations, because that's what she experienced in her life. She lost her husband very early. She was chastised. She experienced a lot of trauma. She literally had to protect her young children from the political machinations of the cousins, the Kauravas. Throughout life, she saw displacement. Even at an older age, she found her children being driven to the forest, deprived of their rights. Great pain. And then now she was in the battlefield, not knowing who is going to survive at an advanced age. It's a terrifying, terrifying experience for a parent to send the child to a battlefield and not knowing what is going to happen at the end of the day. It's a terrifying experience. And this terrifying experience, Mother Kunti survived, and she actually asked for more. And the reason is that when these experiences basically bring a reality into the picture, prove it to her that basically whatever surrounds her in terms of identities are simply fluctuating and they're going to dwindle. And what is steady is a relationship with Krishna. She practically found that she was able to fix herself on the identity of being a servant of Krishna, being eternally connected to Krishna, in an even greater level because of the tribulations that came through. Some of us might be thinking while I speak this, that this is largely theoretical. It's a mental experience, and it's devoid of any kind of pleasure, because we derive pleasure from relationships in this world. But in reality, that is not the case. Most people, even practicing devotees, I would say most, do not know what is happiness. They really do not know what is the quality of happiness. We do not know what is happiness. We just do not know. For most of us, happiness equals peace. If we have peace in life, then we think it's happiness. Or if a problem gets solved, it's happiness. Yeah. For most of us, that's what life is. We do not even know what is real happiness. Even as a practicing devotee, we get a glimpse of happiness. As practicing devotees, we get a glimpse of what is possible, but it is you barely scratch the surface. We haven't even come close to the surface, what to say of scratching the surface. The surface of spiritual happiness lies beyond the material mode of goodness. If we are still situated and conditioned by the material modes of nature, there's no question of us understanding what lies beyond. What we think of as happiness is simply the beginning or a small dose of the material mode of goodness. The material mode of goodness is peacefulness. Sometimes this peacefulness of the material mode of goodness leads to complacency. People become inactive because they feel good about themselves. And you see this a lot in India, especially amongst the older generation. The older generation in India, the generation before my generation, were largely pious. They were largely pious. And because they were pious, they accumulated piety. And that piety basically gave them resources. And basically, they are in the mode of goodness. So they are basically peaceful, calm about their lives. They have certain things going for them. And they have their daily practices of going here, going there, going for the walks, etc. And then they lead life. This is complacency. Yeah? And for us, in the material world, that peace is what we call as happiness. They call it happiness. In reality, we just do not know how to quantify, or how do we even know what is happiness? We just do not know. We just do not know. When the acharyas write that when they chant the holy names, they say that I'm swimming in the nectarian ocean of the holy names. Does anybody even think that it's a metaphor? Do you think it's a metaphor? Most of us think it's a metaphor. Most of us think that they're just making it up by saying it's a nectarian ocean and they're swimming in it. In reality, for a higher chanter, for someone who has accomplished spiritual life and they're chanting sincerely, Harinam is literally sweet. Just as much as you'll put sugar candy in your mouth, every time you say Harinam, you will find sugar spreading in your mouth. This is a literal experience. It is not a concoction. It is not a metaphor given to help us understand that there's an ocean. There is an ocean of nectar. We just do not know what is happiness. We just do not know what is happiness. We struggle to define happiness. Our sense of happiness is extraordinarily distorted because our sense of happiness is basically no trouble. Our sense of happiness equals no trouble. Our sense of happiness equals I somehow wanted to make some arrangement for sense gratification that has worked out well. Yeah? That's our sense of happiness. We just do not even know what is happiness. Most of us don't. Most of us don't. So, imagine Krishna being with someone and they're literally overwhelmed by his presence. They're overwhelmed by the whole presence of Krishna to such an extent that they're experiencing ecstasies. When they're experiencing ecstasies, they have the ability to overcome suffering, pain. Suffering is the subject matter of the modes of nature. Suffering is the subject matter of the modes of nature. A combination of passion and ignorance is suffering. A combination of passion and ignorance is suffering. At least in the mode of goodness, there's a sense of peace, there's some happiness. Pure suffering, passion, ignorance. So one can be in pain, but they may not suffer. One can be in a bodily condition which is filled with pain, but they will not suffer because their identity has already established itself in the spiritual sky. Both feet are in the spiritual sky. Krishna is standing in front of them. Krishna himself is in front of them and is overwhelming them with ecstasies because you can imagine Krishna's name, which is non-different, can produce sweetness in the mouth. It's nectarian as an ocean. You can imagine the presence of Krishna. Discussing Srimad Bhagavatam in the morning is extraordinarily munificent. It is supposed to, it delivers the whole age of Kali. The prescription for the age of Kali is to read Srimad Bhagavatam and hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Nityam Bhagavata Sevya. Basically, reading Srimad Bhagavatam is the prescription for Kali. Reading Srimad Bhagavatam is the prescription for Kali. And Bhagavat is not different from Krishna. The holy names are not different from Krishna. If one can basically chant and then experience nectar, imagine the presence of Krishna in front of you. Imagine the presence of Krishna in front of you. There's really no word to describe what the ecstasies would be of these devotees who really had him in their presence and were able to serve him. So they were in pain because they had lost their immediate near and dear ones. But they also knew that it was the plan of someone who loved them far beyond anybody else's capacity. When Mother Uttara saw Krishna, she saw someone who loved everyone in that particular assembly far beyond the capacity of their own near and dear ones. Far beyond the capacity of their own near and dear ones. Far beyond. She could see that, yes, I had a husband who passed away. I had a brother who passed away. I had a father who passed away. But here's Krishna. His capacity, his love for me is far greater than all of them put together, because that is the amount of love which Krishna imposes upon those who are dear to him. She could experience it. Her eternal identity was established. She also knew that since her husband, father, brother left their bodies on the battlefield serving the Lord's command, they would have been taken care of and they would be in the perfect condition. They would have found a better place than most others would. She also was very happy to be put into a position of service, to be left there to carry forward the generation of Pandavas to the next yuga. Where was the question of Parikshit Maharaj if Mother Uttara had also succumbed to her grief? She nurtured him, ran to Krishna. Krishna gave the opportunity for her to come running. By coming running, she practically threw away whatever constraints she had in terms of grief, and then ran to preserve what was to be preserved for the future. Sometimes you have to learn to give up the past so that you could preserve the future. Some animals are very good at it. Some animals, basically, if they get trapped in a hunter's trap, if their leg gets caught or their limbs get caught in a hunter's trap, they try and struggle out of it throughout the night, and they can't really get away from the hunter's trap. But they know that if they don't get away by the morning, the hunter would kill them. As a consequence, these animals, because of their survival instinct, they used to basically chew their limb which was caught. That was very painful, but they knew that that was necessary to move forward. Now, this is a similar circumstance where a tribulation that came in the form of the Brahmastra that was shot by Ashwatthama drove Mother Uttara out of her own despair into a frenzy of wanting to protect her child. This practically removed her complacency. She moved forward and she ran towards Krishna and took complete shelter. This is Sharanagati. This is Sharanagati. The opportunity for complete surrender comes when you're surrounded by circumstances that you can't handle. If you can't handle certain circumstances, where will you go? You will run. You will run to Krishna. This is basically Sharanagati. When circumstances overcome us, which are far beyond our capacity to handle, we would surrender to Krishna. And then we would feel great, great happiness. We would feel great peace. This example that is given by our acharyas is that a bee, I'm talking about a honey bee, it goes around to different flowers during the day and it searches for honey. And as it is searching for honey from different flowers and trying to drink honey, it basically also comes in touch with the thorns of these flowers. As it comes in touch with the thorns of these flowers, the thorns shred the wings of the bee. So it is extraordinarily hurt, inconvenienced, but it has to drink, it has to survive. It goes, drinks honey from this terrible, extraordinarily difficult circumstances. But then, after struggling and really, really struggling like anything and going through a lot of pain, this honey bee finally reaches the lotus flower. The lotus flower, as it enters the lotus flower is very soft. It's very protective. And the lotus honey is considered to be the best of honeys. It's considered to be superlative. And she basically, the honey bee, enters into the lotus flower and starts relishing the honey, which is in the lotus flower. It starts relishing the honey in the lotus flower. Quite remarkably, when it starts relishing the honey in the lotus flower, it is sunset. And as the sun is setting, the lotus flower begins closing. We all see the phenomenon. The lotus flower opens with sunrise and then closes with sunset. It's basically highly coordinated with basically the Surya, Lord Surya. When Lord Surya rises in the east, you find the lotus blooming. As Lord Surya rests in the evening, then you find the lotus shutting up. So this lotus closes, and the honeybee, which is very engrossed in drinking this honey, it forgets the fact that the lotus is closing, but it doesn't mind because it's safe and it has an abundance of honey, and it is relishing the honey, and it is within the lotus flower, and it keeps relishing the honey there. Now that is what Krishna consciousness is. When we try and then fix our issues outside, we are like the honeybee which goes to these flowers with thorns, trying to drink a little bit of honey. They're not very generous. They give us very little, but they shred our wings. They make it very difficult for us. We go through such intense struggles. And once all these struggles are over, by good fortune, and sometimes this good fortune arises after several lifetimes, we finally reach the lotus flower. And then we enter into the lotus flower of Krishna consciousness at the lotus feet of the Guru. Yeah? Guru Pada Padma. Why is it that the Guru Pada is Padma? Why is it the Guru Pada is basically a lotus? Because after going through so many struggles, like the honeybee, the jiva, which is us, we also find deep shelter at the lotus feet of Guru. And when we find deep shelter at the lotus feet of Guru, then the lotus flower of Guru basically gives us an abundance of nectar, but ensures that we are also safe. This is the feeling of Mother Uttara when she rushes before Krishna. This is real nectar. This is being seen as one of the first scenes of Srimad Bhagavatam in the first canto. But what is the summary of this particular scenario? The summary itself is that intensity is required. It's a prerequisite for seva. It's a prerequisite for us to be able to move forward in Krishna consciousness. If we experience intensity and we're also in touch with spirituality, we have the ability to shed the illusion of connections to this world and take deeper shelter of our eternal life. And as we contribute more and more to building the eternal identity, this would become easier. If you invest in your eternal identity on a daily basis, then this whole process becomes easier. If you do not invest in the eternal identity, then we are caught up with challenges because we really can't do much. Now, please understand the distinction. You need to invest into this identity. You invest into your professional identity. You invest into your relationship with the partners, relationship with other relatives. There is an investment required. Yeah, there is an investment of energy. There's a reciprocal arrangement. There's a back and forth between us and relatives, etc. There's a back and forth between our professional life and us. These are investments. And all these investments basically require a lot of energy. And as we invest more and more in building such an identity, we fail to understand that those identities are also being attacked by material nature because that's its design. And if we invest more and more in the identity of being the servant of Krishna, we begin unfolding as servants of Krishna. Because wherever we put energy, we are going to really get payoffs. So this is the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, where there's an intense crisis in the lives of the dearmost devotees of the Lord. So he is not being partial as far as material energy is concerned. Material energy is ruthless, material energy is painful, and there is no one who is spared. But those who have Krishna, they may have pain, but they don't suffer. That's the difference. There could be pain, but there is no suffering. Suffering is when we identify with this world. Suffering has a lot to do with the identities of this world. The lesser and lesser we are identifying with the world, the more and more we are identifying with Krishna's identity of being a Krishna servant, the greater would be our ability to cope and move forward in this world and be also able to make the transition when the time comes. It's a matter of daily work. It is not a matter of being able to wake up one day at an advanced age thinking that we could cope with it. This requires investment on a daily basis, just as much as we invest in our careers. Yeah? No one can really make it to the top if they were to start at the age of 55 or 60. Can they? I'm talking about professional life. They can't, because they would have to put a lot of efforts and steer their way through tens and tens of years of maneuvering for them to reach where they ought to reach, and then for them to maintain what they ought to be. It's a huge exercise, and it basically can cause a lot of pain. Yeah. So the point we're just trying to make here is that we are basically seeing immense challenges come forth in the lives of devotees. And this devotee Parikshit, who is born from the womb of Mother Uttara, who went through such trauma, is again facing trauma because she's still on the planet and is basically seeing Parikshit, her son, he's going to pass away. Yeah? Now, again, one more problem. This is a great soul who practically, he's a great soul who practically has gone through so much, but has such intense faith in the words of Krishna. So she runs to Krishna for protection. So we see that particular objective of intensity in spiritual life, intensity in material circumstances, driving those who are in touch with Krishna to take deeper shelter, Krishna coming forth and having interactions with them. This begins the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the first and foremost instruction of the first canto is for us to be serious students, for us to be able to understand the intricacies of Srimad Bhagavatam. We need to invest in our spiritual identity of being servants of Krishna. The investment requires the different aspects and angas of bhakti, which is the anga of basically sadhu sangha to receive faith, nama smaranam, the chanting of Harinam, Srimad Bhagavatam, worship of the deity, and Dham Seva, which is being able to have an aspiration to serve the holy dhams of Mayapur, Vrindavan, Jagannath Puri, etc. So the point which you're trying to make here is that we need to have a daily program of being able to do this. And as we invest in this activity, we will be building ourselves into an identity which is steeped in eternity, which is connected to Krishna, and which is connected deeply to eternal life serving the Lord. And as we do this and the sambandha increases, we will find that our service improves. We will find that we also have the ability to take decisions that are Krishna-centered as we progress further, because we are now focusing on the identity of being Krishnadas and Krishnadasi. So this is the basic function of the first canto. And into this particular turmoil comes this great Parikshit Maharaj. And when a devotee of Krishna is cursed, it is so wonderful that even when he is cursed by the Muni to die, the son of the sage to die, he basically becomes an instrument of extraordinary power to be able to provide Srimad Bhagavatam to the world. So what an amazing, amazing, eternal function of being able to facilitate Srimad Bhagavatam. And we also notice the time factor towards the end, that this was someone who was so righteous that as long as he was on the planet, there was no question of the yuga changing. Parikshit had to leave. He had to facilitate Srimad Bhagavatam and also had to leave for Kali Yuga to come. So this was basically the time factor which forced Parikshit Maharaj to leave as well. Because with his being on the planet, there was no question of sinful nature to come in. It was quite fascinating to see how he devoted himself and managed the kingdom. So this is what we initially saw in the first canto. There are so many other nuances in the first canto. We learned about Sri Narad Muni. So we heard about Sri Narad Muni. We found out about the glories of serving. The glories of serving, and we particularly saw the service rendered by Sri Narad Muni to his gurus. What did he do? He was fortunate enough to partake remnants. Remnants or prasadam left by great personalities who are self-realized has the ability to deliver us because their consciousness is also passed on through that. And he basically takes permission from them, which is proper etiquette, and then partakes the prasadam, which has been honored by the great transcendentalists. By doing so, they become very pleased and they impart faith into his heart. And this as a young child. So we will be looking into a few of these things in the subsequent week. We would want to basically highlight some of what we saw in the first canto, some very important facts, and we will touch upon that in the subsequent week. And then we would also go on to the second canto. The second canto starts interestingly. I was hoping to touch upon the second canto today, and I was wanting to touch upon briefly what the second canto starts with, but I think I'll reserve it to the subsequent week, and I would want to still touch upon and highlight some of the things that we spoke about in the first canto, and then we will get into the second canto in the subsequent session. So I'll stop here, and I'll take questions from you, and we will conclude today's session with somewhat of a summary of what we had to understand from the tribulations that the great devotees went through in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. Any questions or comments, please?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Small question, like when you see the Parikshit, and when Parikshit Maharaj is there, the Kali cannot enter. So does it mean that like before Parikshit Maharaj, like when Yudhishthira Maharaj was there, to what was the situation, how it is different from Parikshit Maharaj presence and before Parikshit Maharaj?
Well, basically, Parikshit Maharaj continued the legacy of his uncles, his granduncles, his grandfathers. He continued the legacy. As long as the Pandavas were in place, there was no question of deep sinful culture coming in play. There was no question of very deep sinful culture coming in play as long as the Pandavas were present. This is one of the reasons why Krishna practically wanted this major cleanup during the Kurukshetra war. If Kali Yuga, as we see it today, is intense, imagine if Parikshit Maharaj and Pandavas were not ruling the planet at all before Kali Yuga began. Imagine the circumstance if the Dharma and the general consciousness of folks from the previous Yuga was not taken care of by a great personality like the Pandavas. Krishna basically wanted a major cleanup of the Kshatriya class before Kali Yuga began so that there could be proper Varnashrama, which is observed, there could be proper consciousness could be given, and there will be proper samskaras in the kingdom so that wonderful things could happen. Without which Kali Yuga would have been far more intense. It would have accelerated far beyond our comprehension. So to answer your question, it is the same. He was continuing the culture of a Krishna conscious king. He was a very powerful king, and the kings being very powerful in those days meant they could capture consciousness of their citizens. It was not a matter of using arms. It was a matter of being able to understand consciousness and being able to position the kingdom in such a way that the environment is conducive for consciousness, being able to allow the environment to be progressive for consciousness. So stopping certain things from coming in, managing the economics, ensuring that everybody got what they wanted. Basically that particular aspect of it is very important because then it allows for consciousness to prevail and higher consciousness to proceed further. So basically managing it according to Vedic norms is an absolute must. So this particular consciousness that was being managed by Parikshit Maharaj involved the environment. It also involved individual citizens having their consciousness being monitored by the king. That's the reason why he was able to spot someone who was beating up a cow. It was so unusual for a cow to be ill-treated in the kingdom. It was such a sight. Today, the cows are ill-treated everywhere. That particular time, it was so unusual for a cow to be ill-treated that it came in the Bhagavatam. It has become a feature of Bhagavatam, where there's a statement being made that in a place where the cow is ill-treated, in a place where the Brahmanas are ill-treated, then Krishna leaves. Yeah? So it was so unusual to see such an occurrence. So just to give a little snapshot of, the kind of environment that they were in then.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other comment or question?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I wanted to ask, is it okay to be reading off your computer rather than a hard copy? Is it the same effect, or is it better to have a hard copy of the Bhagavatam?
Sorry to cut you off. Absolutely, if that's what works for you, it's absolutely fine. It's just a matter of preference. It's a matter of preference. It's a matter of convenience. Yeah, we don't want to get too caught up with the mode. I prefer hard copy. For some reason, I'm sentimental. I like a book. Yeah, and I like books. I kind of have the computer as well, but I tend to favor books more than that. But if this what works for you, it's perfectly fine.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Haribo.
Prabhu, I was trying to take some notes and I think I missed. You spoke about we don't know the actual happiness real. And you said surface of spiritual happiness is, and somehow I missed that. Can you repeat that again, Prabhu, please?
What was the first part of your question? First statement that you made was,
We really do not know what is happiness is, basically. And then you said the surface of the spiritual happiness is.
yeah, well, basically the surface of the spiritual happiness is the mode of goodness.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so, the higher mode of goodness, which is unsullied by passion or ignorance, is practically the beginning of spiritual happiness. This is what we mean by Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, na sochati, na kanchati. In the Bhagavad Gita, we talk about Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma. This person is exhilarated, they're ecstatic, they're in such happiness. Now, what is this happiness? They have come in touch with Brahman, which is Krishna's effulgence. Now, imagine the happiness of coming in touch with Brahman and add on to it coming in touch with the origin of Brahman, Krishna. Knowing fully well our relationship with him. Does it make sense? Yeah? That's what I meant by saying the surface of happiness is the material mode of goodness. And people really recognize the material mode of goodness as happiness, but in reality, even the material mode of goodness is phenomenal. The material mode of goodness at its highest level is ecstatic. That's the reason why they say that if one gets promoted to the planet of Lord Brahma, which is the material mode of goodness, there would be complacency where they would really not have the ability to want or desire progress and to move away from that realm.
Yes. Prabhu, can I just ask you at this point, sometimes when we are not happy, but still we know there is a hand behind, there is a reason behind, and nothing happens without Lord's interference. So that also make you to feel content. So can you just speak about that? Is it something to do with the happiness, being contentment? Can you just explain that also?
Yeah, well, being satisfied.
Yeah.
But how is it that we are being satisfied? Your statement itself says that you're satisfied because you're attributing a certain condition of your life to Krishna. In other words, you're introducing Krishna into the mix, and that's why you're satisfied. Otherwise, you're not.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct? You're basically saying, my circumstances are such, but this is the will of the Lord. Krishna, you desire this. So for your service, you're desiring this. As a consequence, you're able to overcome, you're able to transcend. This is called transcending a difficulty. This is called transcending a difficulty. Yeah?
Yeah, okay.
This is called transcending. But then transcending is very different from always being transcendental.
That's correct.
Transcending is where you jump when someone is throwing a curveball at you.
Yes, okay.
But how many times can you jump in life? So it's important to basically be transcendental. That's the reason why we need to work on becoming transcendental. Yeah, because transcending takes a lot of energy. So, for example, when someone is put through intense suffering, they can't be put through intense suffering for too long because they can't take it. They can transcend it for some time, but then they'll start breaking down. At some point, it'll start breaking down. So it's important to make the transition to the next level.
Yeah.
It's very important.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Sure. Any other question or comment?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I was just thought of asking you, requesting, today is being Advaitacharya's appearance day. Do you want to speak about him as well? A little bit.
Okay. We can definitely talk briefly. We can talk briefly about him. Thank you for reminding me.
Thank you.
See, what is glorious about Sri Advaitacharya Prabhu is that Sri Advaitacharya is Mahavishnu. But Sri Mahavishnu himself did not feel that he had the qualification to deliver the whole world. So he ended up taking the Shila that he had of Lord Narasimhadev. Some say it's Mahavishnu, some say it's Narasimhadev. So I'm deferring that to different sources. I'm not wanting to enter into a debate, but he took his deity of Nrsimhadev and he went on to the Ganga in Mayapur, and he, in near Mayapur, and he used to offer worship on a daily basis, crying profusely for the Lord to descend, to deliver the souls of this age. What is fascinating is this is directly the Lord himself, Mahavishnu. But he was so humble that he was basically asking Lord Gauranga to come. And what is also fascinating to see is the reason why it was Advaita Acharya who brought down Lord Gauranga. Why was it that it was Lord Advaita Acharya who brought down Lord Gauranga? This is a phenomenal fact. Sri Advaita Acharya is Karanodakashayi Vishnu. As he lies on the causal ocean, he is glancing at material nature and impregnating material nature with the jivas. It is because it is the Karanodakashayi Vishnu, who is Advaita Acharya, who sends the jivas into material nature in the first place. His compassion for these jivas is very great. As a consequence, he's crying for help from Lord Gauranga, saying, come down because I have sent them, you must come down. So his role in sending jivas in is being acknowledged as one of the Purushas. You see, there is Karanodakashayi Vishnu, there is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu and Shirodakashayi Vishnu. As Karanodakashayi Vishnu lies on the causal ocean, and all the jivas at the end of the annihilation of the universes, they're all embedded into his being. And each time he inhales the universes, and each time he exhales, he's exhaling the universes. And along with the exhalation of the universes, the next step after exhalation is to support the universe. So he enters into the universe as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. And then he impregnates matter with jivas by his glance. By his glance. Krishna's glance fulfills every other purpose. So his impregnation is through his glance. He glances at material nature. That glance takes on the personality of Lord Shiva. So basically, the point is that it is Advaita Acharya who basically impregnates material nature with jivas. So he takes on the first responsibility of sending jivas to material nature. As a consequence, he is very, very compassionate because he is the one he feels who is responsible for their plight in Kali Yuga, for their plight in so many different yugas of being embedded in material nature. And he feels responsible, but he also feels so humble. He feels so humble because he doesn't feel that he is qualified enough to deliver them. So he sits down and he worships his deity, requesting his deity, who is Lord Gauranga, to descend. He understands that it is Gauranga's time. He understands that it is Lord Gauranga has to descend. He is worshipping him. And then Lord Gauranga descends due to the call of Sri Advaita Acharya. It is said that if you go to Mayapur and your heart opens up, it is due to the compassion of Advaita Acharya. If you start crying while you chant, whilst you go and come back from Mayapur, your heart is opened up. It is the mercy of Sri Advaita Acharya. Because the compassion carried in his heart is overwhelming. It is overwhelming. It is his compassion which practically drew down Lord Gauranga. It drew down this entire process and this movement. And as he walked, as everybody walked on the streets of the world and they're receiving Premanam, it is due to Sri Advaita Acharya, not an ordinary accomplishment. What is so fantastic about all of this is there is this extraordinary humility. There is this, he was older than Mahaprabhu. It's definitely one generation above. And there's extraordinary humility and also a sense of compassion, which is so extraordinary. So I think I just thought I'd share a few words, not so much, but since you asked me about Sri Advaita Acharya.
Thank you very much for the question.
Sure. Anything else? Okay, so we will conclude today's session. Thank you very much for participating. And then we will begin again next week with briefly touching upon it, because I realized that we spent a whole year discussing the first canto almost. So it's not fair for us to just begin the second canto without a few sessions. But I do request you to read through, because then you would be able to participate. You would be able to also be able to take back a lot more. So I request you to read through before you come for these sessions. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hi, Bo.
Thank you.
Thank you.